But if your game, AKA your rules, are you only get credit if a lead was converted and that lead is associated to the channel that you drove from, and you will never get credit if they came in organically or direct, you are already aligned with leadership. Leadership are the people who pay for your paycheck. It's not your director of demand gen who's like third down on the totem pole. It's John, the CMO, who reports to Bill, the CEO, etc. Right? Those are the people that are going to determine at the end of the day, like, are you getting paid or are you getting laid off? And you need their buy-in. Welcome to episode 2, the attribution mirage, why your paid campaigns aren't getting credit. This is a big topic, attribution in B2B, long, complex sales cycles, multiple decision makers. This is one thing that I often hear the most struggles and pain around of attribution. How do I understand if my ads are actually working, and, putting my money in terms of where, I'm getting my return on investment, and all these complexities and nuances. So this is going to be a hot topic. So if you guys are struggling with attribution, this one is for you. Gonzalo, welcome. Let's dive into it.
Yeah.
So attribution, where does your brain go when you hear the word attribution?
I always think about that image where it's like the journey and it's so messy, like all the dots, all the lines. That's where my head goes when I hear attribution, because the truth is it's a mess. Yeah. And everyone is trying to figure it out the best they can. You have so many tools, but ultimately it's still a mess, because the more data points you get, the more confusion it brings, the more aligned you have to be to trust those data points. So yeah,
100%.
I always think about mess when I hear attribution.
Me too. I think about mess, and I think about wasted money, spending thousands of dollars on an attribution tool. People, they get locked in these 12-month contracts. They don't have foundational pieces in place in terms of data, analytic structure, and then the tool never gets up to speed. Fast forward, they never actually get any value from their tools, right? And then to add insult to injury, not to just like rag on attribution tools, but it creates like more questions than answers.
Yeah, because they're powerful. And I mean, I was on that side as well. Like, one day I thought I had it figured out. Amazing dashboards. The other day, I tweaked something a little bit. Now that it is completely off. Or the results I was seeing the day before, when performance was looking good, no longer is looking good.
Yeah.
So it's powerful, but it's like with great power,
comes great responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Spider-Man.
Yeah,
100%.
Exactly. You have all of these, but you need to be aligned with the team. And guys, we are looking at this, we trust this data, so this is what we're going to look moving forward, at least like for a couple of months, so that even if it's not perfect, because it won't be, at least you're always looking at the same data. You're not making changes as you go to the data points. And
that's a big deal, because a lot of people, I'm not going to name names, but what I've experienced in the past is a lot of people will manipulate these tools to show their channel is performing the best. We're kind of getting deep in this, right? Like, where they're changing the model, right? They're like, oh, wait, actually, we're not actually going to use last touch today. We're going to switch you to first touch, or vice versa. And they'll play with the filter criteria, where, oh, we're actually going to include this source as well.
Whatever looks best.
Whatever looks best, so that they can make their case. And then what happens at the end of the quarter is you have like one team saying this, another team saying this. Both teams are saying they're crushing it, and then the CEO is looking at this and saying like, but I can see our cash flow and our revenue, and we're not, and there's like a fundamental misalignment. So I think a really good place to start, and for everyone using tools, there is a place for tools, which we'll talk about, but I think a first fundamental place to start is just business alignment around, does your strategy and your attribution approach actually come together? So I'm curious, with you specifically, as the head of performance, like, you're running all these strategy proposals with clients, and you're putting together these strategy plans with our performance marketers, right? Like, you've been in a lot of these strategy calls. How are you thinking about attribution and aligning it to the strategy?
Yeah, what I see often is that companies want to go ungated, which is, like, for those that don't know, like, putting ads in front of the right titles, the right companies, as you might have seen in episode 1. And instead of trying to get an opt-in, a form submission, you just throw the content to the people, they engage with whatever content they want. And then when it's time to convert, they will raise their hand and they'll speak with you. That's like, of course, simplified way of explaining how Ungated works. And that's what companies want to do because it makes sense. That's the truth. Like we were just like 2 or 3 minutes ago saying how complex the journey is, how messy the attribution is. So why are you trying to get an opt-in just to prove the effectiveness of your paid media strategy? On the other hand, also too, it's more expensive than, I don't know, putting a thought leader ad in front of you and you decide if you want to engage or not. And when you, Sylvia, want to convert, you'll remember my brand and you will do it anyway. You don't need me to be like offer pitching you all the time. And that's why I hear it often, because it makes sense. The problem is, even if it makes sense for marketing teams and you have some sophisticated leaders that get it, when it's time to prove that to leadership, it's a whole other conversation, because leadership, and we had that experience with a client. We were running Ungated on LinkedIn and most of their budget was going to LinkedIn. And then leadership stepped in and was like, okay, why are we spending 80% of our budget on LinkedIn if Google is driving, 90% of pipeline? And that's a losing fight, right? Because you can't debate that, because that's the truth. Because we were not expecting LinkedIn to drive like direct pipeline in the first place. So aligning on the business goals, it's important, because if the way your leadership, not you, like leadership is looking at the numbers is based on last touch attribution. So you need to drive a form submission, an opt-in to then help connect the dots internally, like this person from AdConversion filled out the form this day, AdConversion became a client. Okay, we can tie it back. But if that's the way that you guys are measuring the success, you can't be doing Ungated, because yes, you'll still get some opt-ins, some form submissions, but most of the strategy, it's like people engaging with an ad on LinkedIn, people reading a piece of content on your website, people checking the pricing page. And when it's time to convert, they will either come from Google. If you have Google branded campaigns running, that'll eat most of your conversions anyway. But even if they come through organic or email, whatever the case might be, or maybe if you're targeting a list of accounts and sales also is, maybe they'll respond to sales and now sales gets the credit. And from my experience, Ungated isn't the way to go. And that's what we came to realize with our clients too, right? Because even if we, with our creative team, can support Ungated, the truth is, at the end of the day, if, again, performance is there across the board, no one cares. But if performance starts going down, they'll start asking those types of questions. Why is X amount of the budget going there if pipeline is coming from the other way? So that's why it's important to, first of all, understand what are your rules to the game, right? How your team is crediting that success. Otherwise, again, if it's going well, no one will bother you, you're crushing it. But if performance starts going down, even if you're on the side that we are as an agency, it's, if we're pitching Ungated to a client and
let it all out. Let it all out.
If we're pitching that to a client, then
yeah,
because it makes sense, the client will say, yeah, let's do it. Then the marketing team is all aligned, but then the bosses, like the higher ups that aren't in the day-to-day, are not in the meetings with us, because they don't have the time, neither they have to, they won't get it. So unless you're super aligned internally and you have a clear way, and also too, like we've become spoiled from seeing those brands like Cognism, like putting all that content out, people engaging, oh, that's pretty cool, I want to do the same way they are. But they can't. That's the truth, because that also requires a mindset shift. And that's not even just our customers. Most brands aren't ready for it, because they also need to educate their bosses on that new mindset and that new approach to measure that success. I know I kind of went out.
No, it was great. Yeah, this is performance therapy, right?
Yeah.
Like,
but that's what I see. Everyone wants to do Ungated, but only a few are ready to do Ungated. And when I say it, I don't even say the marketing teams. Really, the company isn't ready, because the whole company needs to be aligned.
Yeah, 1000%. Just to unpack that and like double down on this, because it's so important. If you get this wrong, everything else is harder, and it really is like the one domino that sets up all the other ones. You mentioned game, and you used the word game, and I really like this frame. And the way we think about it is every business is a game. So for us, in the context of in the agency world, when we inherit a client, we've just entered a new game. And this game has a set of rules of how we determine success or failure. And whether it is philosophically wrong or right, this is the game that you are now playing. So for context, like we're talking about ungated, and ungated is basically promoting content in feed, letting people interact with it. You don't care if they click or they convert. You're not looking for direct conversions. You're just letting it run. And then over time, through organic and direct, you'll see these people come inbound because they know about you. They've been educated, right? That's essentially the strategy that you are trying to propose. But if your game, AKA your rules, are you only get credit if a lead was converted and that lead is associated to the channel that you drove from, and that's the only way you're going to get association, and you will never get credit if they came in organically or direct, you are already killing yourself. You're like setting yourself up for failure, because even if the ungated strategy was actually kicking butt, you're not going to get the credit.
Yeah.
So then you're just going to, you know what I mean? Like you're going to end up at the end of the quarter, you're going to say, oh, organic and direct is crushing it, it's up, etc. Our pipe to spend looks really good. And maybe you can make a case and change a mind of a sophisticated leader that gets it and that's open-minded, etc. But assuming like you're in the worst case scenario where you're dealing with like antiquated organizations that are like used to like events and, enterprise selling and, they're sales led first and they don't really believe in marketing. Like I'm sorry, but you're not gonna have a job in, like 6 to 9 months because it's just fundamentally flawed. So this is a hot topic and it's like something we're so passionate about because it really is so important. So in terms of this game, right, and understanding the game you're in, the first thing I would say is like align with leadership, just like Gonzalo and I are talking about. And specifically when we say align with leadership, I want to define what leadership is. Leadership are the people who pay for your paycheck. It's not your director of demand gen who's like third down on the totem pole that like is your direct report boss. It's, John, the CMO, who reports to Bill, the CEO, etc. Right? Like that is leadership. Those are the people that are going to determine at the end of the day, like, are you getting paid or are you getting laid off? And you need their buy-in. And of course, like you don't want to go over your boss and like go direct to the CEO and be like, hey, here's my strategy. But you definitely want to make sure that they have eyes on it and that you and your boss, like you can manage up and you can commit to them that like they also need to be bought in, right? And they need to be on the same page. So if you are in that world where you have to generate a lead in order to get associated credit, which is most people from the conversations we've had with prospects and clients, then, I'm not saying like you can't do ungated. You can run a pilot and try to like over time show, but on a small scale. Like, at least like 10% of your budget, but not 80% like in the instance you were describing, right? Which is just a losing game. So if you are in that scenario, make sure your strategy aligns with how you get associated credit. And I think we really beat this one down. And I hope that's clicking for you guys because it's so important. So if you are in the lead gen scenario, it doesn't mean like you're not going to find success. Like it just means you have to do lead gen right.
Yeah.
And we kind of touched on this in like episode 1 briefly at the end of the episode, but like you're actually creating offers centered around a deep pain point that can actually convert the prospects that you're interested in, right? And actually drive real meaningful impact. That you're coming up with offers that are irresistible and compelling that can actually convert on cold traffic and actually drive meaningful impact. And that you can now start to scale that across channels. But for the sake of attribution today, let's now, I want to just segue now that we're aligned on the business, right? So we know, okay, this is the game we're in, right? We understand this is how we're going to get associated credit. In addition to that as well, in terms of that strategy as well, like what regions are we interested in? What is our budget available, et cetera. So you can sort of take all that together and put together a forecast. The next thing is you need to make sure you have your foundations in place. And the way I describe this is I call it the 3 levels of attribution. So level 1 is you need to capture UTMs consistently across sessions. This sounds easy, and it is technically easy, but it's often missed. And it's like one of my favorite quotes is like, easy to do, easy not to do. And when I say you need to capture UTMs across sessions, I'm saying if somebody clicks on your ad and they go to the page, but then they click on your home page, they didn't convert on the landing page, and then they go to your case study page, and then they come back later, and then they convert on your form, are you still capturing the UTMs? And for most people, they're not. We have a client, actually, that I'm thinking about right now, where something broke, and they, like, over, I think it was like a 3-month period.
Yeah.
Something broke, and basically, like, they were getting less associated performance to paid search, and more was going to like direct. And they thought paid search was doing like worse in terms of performance. And then we audited the process, et cetera, and we realized like, oh, wait a second, like we're not actually consistently capturing UTMs across sessions. So we had so much more volume that should have been attributed to search, but this also applies to social and all these other channels. It's actually even more important when you're talking about like create channels, right? Awareness channels, because they're not going to last touch. And anywho, because of this technical thing, we lost credit, and in their eyes, it was like search is bad. The moment we fix that, now everybody's happy, and they're like, search is crushing it, like increase investment, right? So this is where attribution really translates into like real budget and expectations with people. So anywho, first step is you want to capture the UTMs across sessions. The second step is you want to build a paid revenue dashboard. So you want to combine your CRM data and the ad channel data, and you want to combine it together into one place. So you don't have to look at 6 Salesforce reports, 3 HubSpot reports, spend 40 minutes answering basic questions like, what is my cost per lead? What is my cost per opportunity? What is my pipe to spend? How is Google doing versus LinkedIn, et cetera, right? It's one dashboard where you bring all these sources together. And you can do this very low cost, by the way. Like in our Building a Paid Media Program course in Module 3, I show you how to do it for like $100 a month, and it's fully automated. Like if you want to just do it like a quick and dirty way using Google Sheets, or you can do it more, sophisticatedly in, there's level of complexities. But the point is you bring these two sources of data together and you have this paid revenue dashboard. In my experience, just having all that information in one place and then leveraging blended impact, meaning paid and organic, where I can see, okay, overall, month over month, quarter over quarter, what is our blended performance looking like? Meaning paid, what is directly attributed to the ad channels, and organic, what is coming through organic search and direct. So you combine those things together, and now you can understand how is your program doing holistically. And the reason I'm saying organic direct only and not like social or email or referrals is because basically the assumption we're making is like, as I run ads, people are not going to click it. We're building awareness, and then they're going to go search me later on. So that's why we look at organic and direct plus paid, so we can understand the influence of our performance, to understand how is it doing overall. And then finally, now that you have a paid revenue dashboard, step 3 is now you investigate a multi-touch attribution tool. So now it's time to pull out your wallet, right? And start hunting and looking.
Yeah, and I have a question for you on the tools.
Yeah.
Because I feel like sometimes, and not to name names, like I feel like brands invest on attribution tools because they need to prove the success of their work, not because they want a better way to attribute success,
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, whatever we're doing isn't working, we need to prove it is. So let's get an attribution tool. And I wanted to get your perspective. If you agree with it, if you feel like maybe, because I know it's not like a yes or no type of question, but I feel like sometimes the attribution tool, it's like how do I say it? It's like the end solution to like, okay, I tried this way to prove this is working. It didn't stick. I tried this, it didn't stick. So, okay, what if we get an attribution tool to show it's working, even if it isn't, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You ever heard the saying, success doesn't lie? And in my experience, just like with ad conversion and running the business, like on the marketing side, we'll do certain pilots or like we'll do certain tests for certain things. And pretty fast if something's working or not. Like you see signals of success, for context. We post content organically, right? It's like we have a strong content strategy organically. We see people reacting to the posts, right? We see them commenting, we see them sharing, we see them, like you get these signals of like, hey, this is actually working. We should do more of it. And oftentimes when most, at least in my experience, most of the people that I talk to that are in that situation, it's not actually working. And instead of just cutting their losses and like putting foundations in place and then doing a proper test, maybe the way they execute it is wrong. Not maybe, it for sure is. Because usually when you're in that scenario, there's an execution issue. Instead of doing that, they side skirt it, right? And they try to go and find, you know, band-aids to the core problem. Like the analogy, the way I think about it, it's like imagine somebody stabbed you and you have a knife in your chest, right? Or you know, and instead of like addressing the stab wound, you know, you're like freaking out over a paper cut on your finger. It's like, dude, you're bleeding. What are you doing? You know? But this is reality, and like this is how teams operate. So fundamentally, I would say like address the wound, you know, address the core issue, get that solved. So then now you can actually get to the other side of this. And oftentimes for people, if that resonates, if you find yourself consistently having the same problem over and over and over again, and you don't, like, it always feels like this needs to happen and then this will happen, and you don't like get to this place, that is usually a symptom of a lack of foundations and an overall strategy. Just calling that out there. So all in all, yeah, no, I would not, I would not do that. It's definitely a waste of money.
No, and you brought up a good point too, because, and we've run into that same issue. Like you speak with the client, you ask how things are going, because sometimes you also don't have that visibility. And I'm not talking about attribution tools, like disregard that. The more simplified way, you don't have, you're making, like for the first time you're launching an ABM play. You haven't run it before, right? So you want to see success, or you want to understand what the client has to say, because these guys speak with sales and want to see. And when they say, oh, I'm not sure, that's already a leading indicator that it's probably not working. Because, and you said it like at that time, if it's working, that person will know it's working, because the sales team will say, guys, we're getting in touch with these folks. Awesome job. We weren't being able to reach these guys, and now we are. Whatever you're doing, keep it going, you know. But the problem is that just because sometimes we on the agency side, or even the performance marketers in-house, don't have that level of visibility, and they know like, oh, whenever we're running awareness plays, it takes long, depending on sales cycles, they just keep going. Like until someone says, guys, stop, it isn't working. Unless they, of course, if they have that visibility, they pause it, but if they don't, they will keep it going, even when they're unsure if it's working. And that was a lesson that I learned at the time. Like if you're unsure, if the POC is unsure, it's probably not the way to go. Yeah.
Yeah, 1000%.
And that's
so for everyone listening, in terms of what you can do, is the first place I'd recommend that you start, and we're talking about attribution, but attribution is part of a larger conversation, which is just like data analytics, right? And how do I want to use data to make decisions? And where you don't want to go is you don't want to just say, oh, what conversions are you tracking? Or how is your event set up in GA4, right? Or whatever the case might be. Like, that's fundamentally flawed. And I see people like posturing on, oh, I'm tracking this metric, or I'm tracking this metric. And then they're like, it's like ego lifting in the gym, you know? It's like, oh, I lift 50 kg, I lift 40 kg, and you're like, just posturing. Versus fundamentally, should we be lifting dumbbells in the first place? Right? So when it comes to attribution, you need to ask yourself, what questions do I want to answer? And then you use the tool or whatever the method is to help you answer those questions. So for example, in the instance you said, like, we want to do an ABM pilot. Awesome. How are we going to measure success? And we break it out into two parts. We've got leading KPIs. These are things that happen within a 7 to 14-day period. And then we've got lagging KPIs. These are things that happen after a 14-day period. So you don't want to be in the scenario which like so common, where you're just running something like you described, like for so long, and then it's like month 3, and you're like, well, I don't know if it's really working, but this is our budget for the quarter. I'm seeing impressions, hey, we got a like from somebody, and like, that's it. So what you want to do is you want to decide, what are my leading metrics? This is more so for the tacticianer, so the performance marketer, right? So that they can understand, like, okay, if these things are happening, I should continue to invest. I should increase my budget. I should decrease. I should pause this ad. I should, make all these decisions. And then the lagging, the idea is like if these leading things continue to improve, then we'll see the lagging improve as well as a result, right, of that. And in the product world, they call it proxy metrics, right? So like, for example, Netflix, one of like Netflix's most important metrics is watch time. And basically, like if Netflix could have it their way, they would just have everyone logged into Netflix all day, every day for as long as they can. That is their lagging metric. And they have a ton of proxy metrics that they track. And proxy metrics too, these leading KPIs, they need to evolve over time. So it's hard to tell somebody like, this should be your leading KPI, because you're really like adjusting the KPI based on what you're seeing in terms of the impact on the lagging. And also the leading KPI needs to change as well depending on your strategy, which I can give some examples. But going back to the Netflix example, their end goal is to drive more watch time on the platform. On the front end, what they're tracking for leading KPIs or these proxy metrics is they're tracking people when they go to search something on Netflix, do they find what they're looking for? They're also tracking on the shows. I don't know if you ever you refresh Netflix, especially if you're on there often, you'll see like the cards of the movies and the episodes, like they'll change, like the images, the thumbnails. They're split testing to see, does this thumbnail drive a higher click-through rate from this search versus this one? And they're also split testing like, oh, if we put, documentaries first versus this versus that, will we drive more engagement? And then what they're doing too, to take it to the extreme, is they've built a personal algorithm just for you based on your behavior, right? To try to drive, again, more watch time. So for us as performance marketers and B2B and, thinking about this, what are those proxy metrics, those leading KPIs that can help me justify the lagging stuff? So in the ABM example, right? So you're like, okay, I'm going to go after these accounts, they're important for XYZ reasons. These are the decision makers. Then from there, where my brain goes is, okay, what is the offer and the content strategy around it? So for example, if we're going to do ungated and we're going to be focusing primarily on promoting blog articles, and we're like, we want to drive as many people to the blog because our fundamental assumption is the more people who consume the content, the more brand affinity and trust will drive, which will then result in more influenced, direct, and organic, volume, right? Opportunities created or demos booked. So what you want to do, and really what I'm hinting at is, I am trying to understand what is my hypothesis, right, of what I'm trying to solve to be true or not, which we'll talk way more about this in a future episode around experimentation. But just to kind of close the summary here, if I'm promoting blog articles and I'm thinking fundamentally, what is the goal here? The goal is like for people to read the article, right? It's not for them to click on the ad. And a mistake people do is they don't think this deeply about their metrics and how it relates to their strategy. So they'll just track on the leading side like clicks and click-through rate, which are not bad. But again, like the real goal is not the click or the click-through rate. Like that matters and you should look at it as a signal. But the core leading metric in this instance would be how many people actually read the blog. So this is where you have to get creative and like create metrics. So like I might create a metric called an engaged visit. So this is somebody that went to my blog, stayed for at least 60 seconds, and scrolled 75% of the way through. Because then you can make the assumption of like, all right, you were there for a minute and you scrolled 75% of the way through, right? It's not enough if they just stayed for a minute. Maybe they like clicked on your ad and then, they got distracted and they went to the bathroom or something. They had also scrolled 75% of the way through. So now you can optimize your ads, not just on which ad is driving the highest click-through rate, but which one is driving the most consumption, right? And this can change. Like if your strategy, and like in this example of around ungated, is fundamentally around videos and getting people to watch videos, hell, maybe you don't even have a link, right? Then it's like, how many people are actually watching the video?
Yeah.
Right? And that's kind of how I think about it. All right.
Sense, yeah.
We went through a ton there. So let's talk about attribution models, because I think this is another hot one of like, should I use first touch versus last touch? Obviously, you wouldn't use multi-touch unless you have a tool, but what are your thoughts on like attribution models and how it relates to performance marketing?
I think both of them answer different questions, like as any attribution model. So it really depends, to be honest. There are instances where clients are using first touch because they want to measure that the impact of that first interaction with the ads, especially if they're running awareness campaigns. That's what happens most of the time. But on the other way around, last touch is the most commonly used, maybe because it's the easier to explain internally and to get the buy-in to what you were saying. But yeah, I mean, that's really it, to be honest with you, because it's not one or the other. It's more so, okay, what, to your point, what questions or how are you measuring the success? And then depending on whichever responses you have to that, you decide, okay, for measuring the success and you want to see how many first touches we get with specific accounts, we want to start penetrating with these accounts, we will look at first touch. But if the answer is that and you're using last touch, maybe there's the disconnect, right? Mm-hmm. So I see the conversation around attribution model, especially when you're leveraging tools, become a big topic. And it was also for me, right? But ultimately, you need to be aligned. Okay, what answers you're looking for? How are you measuring that success? And then you use the attribution model that best helps paint that picture. Not to get the credit, but to better not only measure the success, but also estimate future success, right? So that's how I think about that. Not necessarily one or the other. And I know you only have two there are more. But, and there's this client that comes to mind that they're measuring success based on, let me see if I recall correctly, like out of the accounts that become pipeline, they're measuring the percentage of them that engage with paid ads. So that's, in theory, can be easy, right? As long as these accounts are closing, you get one impression with these guys.
Yeah.
It's impact. But again, it's not right or wrong. That's the rules of the game of that client. So you can't maybe be looking for form submissions because yes, you still need to drive the leads, but if those leads come from sales, that's fine as long as you're getting touches with those. So yeah, you really need to adjust and leverage the one that best helps paint the picture for you, because maybe for that client, that's how they're measuring success. And in some cases, I mean, the word silly is not really applicable, but it might sound silly for others that have these sophisticated approaches, but for them, maybe they're doing it because their sales team is top notch. They know these guys got it. As long as we get touches, get in front of them, these guys will close it regardless.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, just to reiterate, depending on the picture, and that picture is, again, agreed upon by the people who pay your paycheck, right? Like you've got that buy-in.
Yeah.
Now it's just a matter of choosing the model that helps facilitate and help answer those questions around that picture. One thing I will say is it's helpful to use multiple models, because if you want to look at it from different points of view, but ultimately you should have one way of saying, okay, this is what we go forward with. So like, I want to look at last touch to understand what's the most recent impact. I want to look at first touch to understand what's the original impact. And you can kind of shift between the two. Generally speaking, if you have to choose one or the other and you just want like an answer, I would say last touch is definitely better for ads because there's a recency factor of ads, right? I'm paying for money and I want an impact now, right? I want to drive a response now. And then the other challenge too, just more of like a gotcha to be mindful of that I see with like our clients, specifically like with the reporting and all this stuff, is if you are doing ABM or you have a sales team and you're doing outbound, make sure that those lists of accounts that you upload into your CRM don't muddy up your first touch, because basically they'll upload like a list of accounts from, Sales Navigator, and then Sales Navigator now is the first touch. And then now you're running ads against the list. So any future opt-ins, whatever,
they don't get
you're like, you want to talk about rules of the game? You're effed from the start. You know what I mean? Like there's no chance. So that would be one last thing to close with. All right, this was an awesome episode. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks so much for watching this episode. If today's combo hit home for you and you want to go deeper, check out AdConversion.com. You'll find free courses, a killer advertising community, and if you're ready to scale, we'd love to work with you.